All right. Welcome to Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. I'm a co-host, Betsy Cunningham, and I'm here tonight with my co-host, Kevin Bell, who will introduce a little more about himself.
Hey, Betsy. Yeah, thanks for introducing me. Kevin Bell, 23, Douglas County. I guess I really don't have a lot to say that hasn't already been said. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Kevin.
So, how about Zach or John?
Okay. Hi, I'm Zach, born and raised in Roseburg, regular on here. I'm a junior historian and PhD student at the University of Oregon in Eugene. Always happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm a history grad too for U of O.
Yeah, I'm John Hunter. Been in Douglas County a long time with the Oregon Community Rights Network and with president of Community Rights at Douglas County.
Good to see you, John. Another carpenter.
Yes.
Francis or Joanne, you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm Frances Etherington. I've lived here in Douglas County about 52 years, and I used to work for and I currently volunteer with Umpqua Watersheds and Cascadia Wildlands environmental groups.
Joanne, do you want to introduce yourself? I don't hear you. Go ahead. Now I do.
I've lived in the Milo community for 45 years. Used to work for the Forest Service and Tiller. Have had a couple of businesses and trying to change the world. Thank you for doing it.
All right. And we also have in the room Dave Alba, and I'll kind of introduce Dave, who's actually with Progressive Democrats of America and the coordinator for the Progressive Democrats of Oregon. And he's going to do the Rural New Deal that the PDA authored with Rural Urban Bridges, right?
Rural Urban Bridge Initiative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first, we're going to start out with Patrick Starnes, who's kind of, I say, is a guru of campaign finance reform, particularly in regard to citizen lobbying as opposed to corporate lobbyists. He has done some interesting things with his political drive that has helped really set the mood for this. So I asked he agreed to come and talk to us about what happened within the last couple of weeks since I, saw that there was something hinky going up with the campaign finance. Anyway, Patrick, you want to introduce yourself and you can start the dialogue.
Thanks, Betsy. I don't know about the guru, but definitely a reluctant lobbyist, unpaid like most of us. But I really got connected with campaign finance reform. I'll call it CFR from now on. With the 2018 election for governor, I ran against Kate Brown and Dr. Bueller, and no one was talking about campaign finance reform, obviously, because they were dependent on it. And it had become quite an arms race because if you remember Kitzhaber and Dudley, it was like $2 million when they ran for governor. And now it's over 40 million. So it's just since Oregon, sadly, embarrassingly, one of 5 states like Mississippi with no limits whatsoever. So, and still today, even after all we've done. So in that governor's race, I got to get Governor Brown to commit to amending the Oregon Constitution, which we did with Measure 107 in 2020. And we didn't just barely pass that constitutional amendment, like with 51%, but it got knocked out of the ballpark with 78%. It's totally bipartisan support across the state for campaign finance reform. And the lowest was Lake County in Eastern Oregon was 60%. So any candidate or any person running for office would love to have 60%. That's a mandate. So what was sad is during that effort, a lot of folks were like, well, then what are the limits? And I was like, well, wait, this just amends the Constitution. It allows us to set limits because we tried to set limits, as you may remember, in the 90s and throughout history. but it kept getting thrown out of court because it violated the Oregon Constitution. So the constitutional amendment in 2020, Measure 107, finally allowed us to set limits. So then in 22, I ran against Kotek and Tobias Reed to put pressure on them as leaders in their party to keep campaign finance reform on the front burner. And so during her first session in 24, Tina Kotek signed limits finally. Oregon had limits, but they wouldn't go into effect until 27, which was convenient for her because she can run for governor now with the old system. But what brings us to today is that measure, which I didn't really support because it was so complicated. Measure 4024 was what was passed in 24. So that's convenient, the numbers. But what brings us to today is now Tobias Reed and the new Speaker of the House, Julie Fahey, are trying to postpone it further to 2031, which I called out Tobias on. That's convenient for him if he wants to run in 2030 for governor. He can run under the old system. So it's just more kicking the can down the road. And what also was shocking is they were saying that in Oregon, we had this great system of reporting your donations. I had to use it even when I ran for school board. Any donation has to be reported. It's called ORSTAR. And what Tobias Reed, the Secretary of State, is now trying to say is it's going to cost over $20 million to remodel that IT, that ORSTAR IT project, and which is cost prohibitive, of course. Nobody can afford $20 million for a IT program that just is about campaign finance. So basically what they're trying to say indirectly, they're not saying it out loud, is that Oregon can't afford campaign finance reform. And that's this new bill that we're up against is 4018, which just says let the Secretary of State study it. It just postpones it till 2031. And so we have a lot of proponents against it, like Senator Jeff Golden and myself and all the good governance groups of League of Women Voters, Honest Elections, which honest elections are the ones that had the ballot measures that we've supported before and passed over 60% to set limits, but then they got thrown out of court until we amended the Constitution. So we're today, the Oregonian came out with a editorial board guest column against 4018, saying shame, 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 and it's a major violation of trust and all obvious things. You know, the voters in Oregon have voted for this over and over, and we're way overdue, and we still don't have limits. We're still with Mississippi with no limits. So I'd like to turn it over to y'all to share the questions you may have about this conflict and stuff. And parallel to opposing it, what I also proposed, and Senator Golden and hopefully Senator Hayden, my senator from East Lynn County, Cedric Hayden, will have an alternative, which is 4405. And if you're able to pull that up, Betsy, yeah, there it is. It's so simple because it has no corporate money, no PAC money, and as you can read there, if you go towards, yeah, you're at the bottom. It's hard for me to read on my cell phone, but it's $1,000 limit. So Phil Knight's $1,000 is just as loud as anybody else's $1,000 because most of my donors are like 25, 50, 100 is a high donation for a working person. But some of family members and other people we know make six figures, so they can donate 1,000. But most of us can do $50, which is cool. In Oregon, we get a complete rebate for that $50 donation. So in one aspect, it's public financing because the state spends $12 million a year to rebate that $50 donation that you give to school board candidates, governor candidates, or whatever. So this is Plan B, I call it. If the proposal that I didn't support back in 24 is too complicated, and we need $20 million to modify ORSTAR, then this measure 4405 could be a Plan B which is simple and easy to report on the existing ORSTAR system. And what I've always talked when I go door to door in Salem to the Congress or to the state reps and state senators is that you'll hear from the R's, they're worried about the big PAC monies, like the union PAC monies. And then the D's are worried about the big corporate money, like Weyerhaeuser and the big timber money. So this is levels that playing field because now it's just the person who gets the most small donation wins, which is the way it should be. Just small donations from lots of us can finance any election, be it a school board election, state senate, or even the governor's race. Because as you can see, it used to cost barely anything to run a governor's race, and now it's an arms race. So somebody raises 5 million from Phil Knight, then they need 5 million from the union and 5 million from corporations. You need more 5 million from another PAC. So I hope I made this simple enough and clear enough, but let's do questions so we can, yeah, it's many pages long, but that first paragraph 2A really explains it. It's pretty simple. So yeah, if you want to do questions, I can clarify anything I missed.
So I was actually with Patrick up on this last Tuesday. And my question, just because we've also got the audience out here, is the question that we received, while we were in there, in the state legislature so much. And I really would like to talk about this, maybe not right now, maybe a little bit later in the show, but I think it has a certain impact. So, yeah, we can limit what's spent in Oregon, but say, what is the difference for corporate money coming into our elections?
Well,
dark PAC money,
Right.
federal.
Yeah, there's two kinds of campaign contributions. The one is candidate. You donate directly to the candidate, which is what I prefer, and that's what these measures are about. Even the measure that I don't support. So we can limit those candidate contributions, but we can't limit the dark money, which because of the Citizens United ruling, the Supreme Court ruled that corporations are people, which all of us disagree. The changes for that have to be worked out. There was a federal legislative proposal that didn't get any traction, obviously, because it didn't change anything. But Montana has the leading proposal, which because each state charters a corporation, like Nike in the state or Weyerhaeuser. And what Montana is trying to do is in that corporate charter that they limit their donations in that charter. So if you want to be a corporation, you have to agree to not donate to candidates. So because Montana is has the lowest governor donation. I think it's $170 per person. And I think they're trying to get the corporate money and the PAC money. Because the other thing to keep in mind is what happens in races, especially like a House race, which Kevin knows because he ran for a House rep seat, is those members will transfer money from somebody that's unopposed out of their PAC money because they have a personal candidates PAC to this new candidate PAC, like Kevin's opponent. So that those PAC monies, that's another reason PAC monies need to be outlawed too. I mean, each candidate has to have a PAC to collect their donations, but I shouldn't be able to donate $5,000 out of my PAC to somebody that's not even in my district.
And speaking to your point, I mean, the most prominent example that we have literally right here in this meeting right now is Lori Wick is running against Tom Kress. Not Tom Kress, but I think it's Tim Freeman, right, Lori?
Yeah.
And he has a war chest of almost, what, 100,000? Ridiculous amount for a Douglas County Commissioner race. Really?
Yeah.
I'm running against Cress. Thank you.
But yeah, someone's running against Freeman, and these folks.
And that's Shane. Shane Kelly is running against Freeman.
Yeah, and these limits, what's great about these limits in Oregon, if they ever get implied, they've been delayed till 2027, and now they're trying to delay them to 2031. But when they are in place, they will affect school board elections, city council races, county commissioner races, which some of the Douglas County folks will remember. I ran against Kittleman in 2008, and I almost matched her. She raised 15 grand and I raised 10 grand. And then at the last minute, Susan Morgan came in like a Tim Freeman with all that PAC money from all the different buddies, because you'll have buddies in different districts that never have opponents, and so and they can raise the Weyerhaeuser money, and they can raise PAC money and corp because there's no limits. It's the wild, like Kate Brown said, it's the wild, wild west. John, you have a question?
No,
Oh, you're on my screen. I didn't. I thought you were batter up.
So is there a fix to what's happening right now?
Well, the easy fix is that they just put the brakes on it. And it hasn't died in committee yet because it went out of the House Rules Committee. And then now it'll go to the Ways and Means because they've added this price tag of over 20 million. So that's going to be hard to pass. But now tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, I'll be going to Salem for the Senate Rules Committee because which is really interesting because it's only special guests invited. And originally it was just going to be the unions and the corporations were the only speakers, which are both in favor of this change. Because some of the things, it doesn't just delay it. There's a list of like 9 things. Kevin might have it handy with them because we were handing out this list of actual doubling in some cases the limits that had been set in 2024. So it's it's violation of trust to have something worked out with good governance groups, and then they're not invited. But luckily,
Well, and
tomorrow morning, Jason Kafori will be there from Honest Elections to speak against the effort. So that's huge. I think Jeff Golden made that happen.
I'm gonna look at that tomorrow personally too. And when
And
is
you
the
can
hearing,
watch it
right?
after it's recorded. Excuse me?
When is it gonna be all posted, do you think? But I
It
also
takes a
did,
while for them to download it, but you could watch the hearing live at 8 o'clock, but then they'll have a recording of it after the hearing. And they have other issues at these hearings besides this issue, but there's only 4 speakers, I think, and 3 of them are in favor of it, of course. It's the same groups. And to some of Kevin's concerns, he got to get his eyes open to some real surprising you would think are progressive folks in Salem that were like, no, Patrick, we want it wide open so we can pay our workers a living wage and stuff. And Kevin's like, well, all my campaign workers were volunteers. So what are you talking about? So they're used to an old system, and I've had to explain how a new system would be. Because here's 2 examples that Kevin and I explained to members, both Republican and Dem members. If you're dependent on OEA money, so rather than OEA cutting you a $10,000 check, with my new proposal of the no PAC money, the OEA has to do what they were supposed to do, is organized labor has to go tell the teachers, we really like you to donate your $50 to Kevin Bell per house. So that means more effort rather than just writing a $10,000 check that Kevin owes OEA. Or the other example is Roseburg Forest Products. Rather than Alan Ford writing a $10,000 checks, he has to go to his workers at Roseburg Forest Products and say, we would like you to send $50 each to Virgil Robinson or Osborne, I'm sorry, or Tim Freeman or whoever. So and so it disables the corporations and the PACs at the same time, while me and Lori are just calling our neighbors and asking for $50. I know that's a lot of work, but when you go to door to door, when you're at town hall meetings, because one thing I always would say is that you always hear about these small donors, and I would point to the audience in the podcast or in the town hall, and I'd say, you are those small donors. It's your democracy, and we need you to do the small donations. And I got many first-time donors for $20, but what was sad is then when Phil Knight would dump $3 million on Dr. Bueller, my small donors for $20 are like, Patrick, I'm not donating $20. He just dumped 3 million. So this is why we need limits, because it's completely discouraging uh, voters and donors, small donors, and some of them quit voting even. So that's even darker.
I want to ask Patrick about what you've just said about the OEA as an example.
Mhm.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that rather than say the OEA, the Oregon Educators Association, the union, donating what $10,000 to candidates' campaign, the union leadership should turn to their members and say,
Yeah.
give your $50 to X candidate. What $50?
From their personal checkbook, And what's cool about that, Zach, is that that teacher that gives that $50 gets that rebate. So it's publicly financed elections. Because if you donate $50 or $100 per couple, it's completely rebated to you through your taxes. And they can't rebate the OEA check for 10 grand, which is good. We don't want that. But yeah, I'm not anti-union at all. Being a history major, I know the values of that. My dad was a union worker at Dillard Roseburg Forest Products. I've always worked for myself, like John. So we're a union of one as a cabinet maker. But I completely support these variety of special interests. But they need being organized labor, even the steel workers, they need to go to those members and say, we're not writing a check anymore, but we would really like you to support Canada X with your $50 donation. And then when they file their taxes, they'll get a $50 rebate. So it's really not even their money. I mean, the Oregon spends 12 million a year with this rebate.
So
Good questions, Zach.
a complication in that I see is it that presumes that people have an extra $50, maybe even on top of their membership dues to their union, with which they can donate, even if at some later date they're getting it back. People still have to put food on the table
Right.
immediately. Even teachers in Oregon. I
Mhm.
I've known teachers. My mother's been a member of OEA and leadership in local teachers unions for years.
Mhm.
And a very typical thing that she encounters when trying to recruit new members is that people can't afford the basic membership fee for joining the union.
Right, which
So
that's what I would argue
when we're
is
saying
even
that the union itself, which is a ultimately not just a it's not just not merely an institution, but it is consistent of all these people, all of its members.
Mhm.
Um, I would think that this is leaving out those who a union might have the means to advocate for through the form of, say, uh, campaign donations, who otherwise themselves individually would not be able to donate.
Well, and
Well, the,
I have a contact to Zach and myself, which is frankly, as I used to be part of SEIU and the workers union here, as a previous union member, I have the belief that I would rather have that $10,000 stayed in a fund in case of there's a strike instead of for corporate lobbying. And regardless of that, you're right. A lot of people don't have $50, $20 even, or $10 to throw around. But that's why, progressives like us, we start our grassroots campaigns off of single dollars. You know what I mean? As much as you can do and volunteer hours, because what this isn't an attack about organized labor. What this is a organized process against big money in our politics. You know what I mean? And that comes from every side, regardless of who you are. Big money needs to be out. That's why I also agreed with Patrick's other talking about Montana passed there's a ballot initiative that just is now going. I think it's got enough signatures. It's going to the ballot right now, and it's regarding their corporate charters. Because frankly, that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest piece of the pie is the corporations donate so much and they get their way. That's why we don't have a real representative democracy. Is we have a representation of the corporations, big money, but we don't have a representation of the small single dollar individuals. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because that's what really
Well,
matters.
but I don't think it's helpful to conflate a labor union with a corporation.
Well, let me share it this way. Let me pitch it this way. Just like the example I used of Alan Ford writing $10,000 check or the OEA writing $10,000 job. So Alan's going to go to all the Roseburg Forest Products workers who also can struggle to have $50 to donate. So, it just levels that playing field where it's real people donating small donations rather than corporations or special interests, and your family or yourself, when you have struggles to make those union membership dues, maybe that's part of the formula. That's up to the unions. Is if you are a regular donor to their candidates, maybe because your membership is going to that $10,000 check. So
John
it's
has had
still
his
it's
hand
still
up.
your money, Zach.
Yeah, John.
Oh, well, I think Patrick already mentioned it, though. I know from past elections that Roseburg Forest has sent notices out, on their employees' paychecks, basically telling them, how to vote and urging them to donate to the way, to the campaign that they want them to. So, so they've been playing it, on both ends. So
Yeah, they'll have their organized effort within the shop floor, and then they'll have their corporate executives also donating. So yeah, it just really needs to be where your $50, Zach, is just as important as the other person's $50 or $20 or whatever people can do. I mean, I agree, it's difficult, but it also needs to be part of our culture in a democracy. We can't just, because if we don't donate, then it's a vacuum where special interests in corporations will clearly. And when you go to Salem, you'll see all. I was telling Kevin, the shiniest suits are the biggest $1 million lobbyists there that we were in the elevator with.
Well, and it also puts a hamper on our legislative system because, frankly, we have this party system where, people want to support good mentioned bills like this, good thought out bills like this, but they can't really support it because they have to think of their political, their clout. How much can I spend before it's not respected by the leadership, before everything I do is not going on? How much can I actually do? And then they have to think of priorities. And that priorities has to start winnowing down to interests. You know what I mean? Who donated the much? Oh, say there's boat builders, or this pack donated that money. This is why I have to focus on them instead of the overall voters. You know what I mean? Because once you can actually think of the people instead of entities, that's the difference. Because I mean, that's still the otherism we have in our society, and that's why we've got corporations are technically labeled as individuals, is because they have this apparent right to spend money, but frankly it shouldn't be like that. It should be us who control the legislative agenda, and us who get to speak to our legislators. They should be coming to us looking for dollars and not making the rounds to small bit big businesses and everything like that, trying to rally up big dollars.
You
Well,
had others,
I
Betsy, you
kind
had
of
others?
agree. I kind of agree with what, to some degree, what Zach is saying is that, and that has been my position as a union member, as a spouse of a union member of the union. When my spouse was a union member, the Teamsters endorsed Ronald Reagan twice. The Teamsters endorsed Ronald Reagan. So I don't know that there was a self-interest of Teamsters to vote for Ronald Reagan at that time. So the individual members. So that is the counter to, kind of on the side of what Patrick and Kevin are advocating, is the idea that unions are different than corporations. And absolutely, that's true. Their interest is, and it is the common person involved in the unions that makes up the majority of the voter base, or should. But the conundrum is, I've been in a union reform movement. Okay. And so the reality is this, my romanticized ideology of unions is unions of, before my time. Um, but the reality is, it was Teamsters for a Democratic Union, which is still there, and the Teamsters is better, but, they didn't endorse anyone, right, for the last election, which maybe be what the union should be, but it's no objective rationale to the best interest of policies of the union members, from my perspective. So I don't know what to do about that, but the PACs are not just union PACs. There's, would a citizens PAC be okay, right? I mean, because I've even toyed about organizing a PAC, or when Progressive Oregon existed, there was a Progressive Oregon PAC after Bernie Sanders. So, when you look at that, that isn't that that's why I kind of agree with Zach. There's a totally different persona that's in control in
Well,
theory.
it would be a union reforming. It would be a reform that you're talking about because now the organized labor has to get organized to reach out to their members to ask them to donate small donations to these candidates on the ground. And same, like I said, same with the corporations. Nike can't just write a 10,000 or Comcast. I mean, some of these corporations aren't even in Oregon, so they can't donate unless they have a way to organize their workers to donate small donations. And but your Bernie PAC, let's say, would have to do the similar thing is they would have to reach out to those PAC members and say, we really need you to donate $20 to Kevin Bell or whoever, or Lori Wick. We need, so it's doable. And we've seen people adjust to it. Like even Obama started doing the small donor thing, and then Bernie knocked it out of the ballpark. And I think AOC will in this next presidential election. But if it's not a level playing field, you know, then yeah, you're going to have, the Phil Knights and all these folks out donate, But sometimes, what to their credit, even though Phil Knight donated huge amounts to Kate Brown's opponent and to Tina Kotek's opponent, they both won. And so, and were outspent. So this kind of ugly money can, even the dark money that Kevin was mentioning earlier, can backfire on you if you are dependent on small donations and you're being authentic and real to your neighbors and your community. I think we got to bring back public trust and authenticity to this situation because it's way out of whack. Yeah,
Well, if we
people.
were really into community organizing or even civic engagement, this would all be really moot. It would be a natural extension of that, right? The problem is, so many small organizations get fragmented and then they become 501(c)(3s, but that's another topic.
Right.
But
Well, it's another
that makes
corporation.
them impotent for a different way.
And it's
So
interesting being on school boards for 10 years to see different school boards deal with civic engagement in different ways is really cool. And I tried to get the last school board I was on, I was elected twice to, was McKinsey School Board east of Springfield, trying to get them to do what the school district I'm in now, Central Lynn at Brownsville, Harrisburg, um, there to graduate, the students had to have a certain amount of hours volunteering in the community. It could be at the library, it could be at the food bank, it could be if you live in a forest service district, you could volunteer on trails, whatever. But just to learn and have that credit, to learn how to volunteer. And I've warned all my young friends that I've been involved in two different nonprofits, like Francis and I with Umpqua Watersheds, where we got grants and we started the board with no money and boom, we're both employed. So be careful what you wish for when you're doing nonprofit volunteerism, because you could end up being paid full time. In Michigan, when I was learning cabinet making, some friends of I started a recycling. Just like every Saturday, you collect glass and cardboards before recycling became what it is today. And within a year, I had a CDL and I was driving a semi for recycling. So it's like you volunteer your passion and be careful, you might get paid to do exactly that.
I've intentionally volunteered at legal aid after becoming a paralegal, and then I ended up on their board and advocated for an eviction defense unit because that happened to be my expertise. No, I was needed in the community, and I ended up working for that unit, for the eviction defense unit. So, and becoming the union steward. So it was all around good experience. And I do encourage people, young people, anybody to volunteer somewhere if you want a job, right? If you have a passion, absolutely. It's a good way to learn what it really is like and then see if it's still your passion, and you probably can work your way into a job.
Yes.
Good point.
Zach, did that help you with your fears and concerns? The balance of small donations on the other side, like the timber industry has the same challenge that the OEA would have. Let's use Kevin Bell's house race as an example. What else is sad about that kind of situation, Zach, is that in a small district like Kevin's, the OEA won't even donate to Kevin. But what's bizarre is they'll donate to a Portland house race that's safe. I mean, some of these Dems have 80% in these house races in Portland, and they get the biggest donation. So then they become, because here's the other problem with our system in Salem. The leadership is based on your fundraising. So if you're a huge fundraiser, you get to be the chair of X or the chair of Y committee. So if you're the Speaker of the House, you're the master fundraiser because you can raise crazy money. But if you're the chair of the health committee, it's because you got all the hospital money, the insurance money, the big pharma money, and now you're the chair of that committee. And so guess who wags the dog, it's even the system is set up to support this money, and that's how it's not on seniority, or you were a nurse so you should be on that committee, the healthcare committee, or you were a teacher, or like I was a teaching assistant. I wouldn't be chosen to be, or a school board member to be on that committee for education unless I raised tons of money to be the chair. So this would change that as well. It wouldn't just change the elections and who donates and who gets elected. It would change the structure of Salem too, and the committee structure, who gets to be chairs, because then you would hopefully, because you were a teacher, you would be the chair of that committee or something, not because you didn't raise tons of money. It's sad that it's set up by who raises the most money.
So
Anybody else have?
I need to respond to that. So to be clear, I'm not necessarily opposed to the reforms that you're putting forward.
Mhm.
My concern is in considering it to be any kind of solution to anti-popular politics in Oregon.
Mhm.
Um, uh, uh, I'm I'm of the understanding that at these levels of government, in uh, campaigns to elect somebody for House or Senate seat, or even for governor or something of that sort, these derive historically from spoils systems. And uh, I do think it's not entirely accurate um, uh, to think of this finance reform as exactly evening the playing field for campaigns. Because certainly Phil Knight himself, if we want to use him as an example, Phil Knight himself might be able to only donate, say, $1,000 to a campaign, but that has never stopped. Those kinds of limits have never stopped the rich, upper classes from finding ways to get around these problems. And
I agree. It's
Much
whack-a-mole.
of Oregon's land use troubles stem from land fraud in the 1890s.
Right.
That is very possible using individuals like I mean the general story is like the railroad companies are finding people in pubs in the Portland area who
Yeah.
resell land back to the companies for their own
Yeah.
use.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree that it's a whack-a-mole kind of problem. I mean, as soon as we come up with whatever structure, they're going to have their lawyers, the corporate lawyers, figure a way to find the loopholes. So that's why I feel like this is one of those projects that's ongoing, always correcting it. But when you brought up the word populism, which is really dear to my heart, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make the $20 donation be crucial. Not just like, oh, you got a $20 donation. Who gives a crap? No, populism. It's populism because it's like whoever gets the most, in some states, in some cities, they match that. Like Seattle has a 6-to-1 match. So if I do a lot of small donations in Seattle, they'll match it 6-to-1. But Oregon, being dependent on income tax, hasn't quite figured out how to do that. I proposed using the cannabis money uh, to have a match to our donation match. I called it the green elections. But um, but the best thing we have is this $50 rebate, which is not perfect. Yeah, you have to spend it in March for Lori now, and you won't get it until your taxes next time. So, but it's the best we have, and it should be increased. And I'm talking to Paul Evans, a representative from West Salem and Polk County, about increasing that from $50. I proposed 1,000. He was negotiating down to 250. But yeah, so that's as close as we're probably going to get to publicly financed elections, which I support. But the other part is that whole $20 tab to remodel the OrStar system. I don't know how many of you have have worked. It's a great system, in my opinion. Every donation I have, I recorded it. And what's cool about it is basically any donation under 100 is anonymous, which is cool because, you know, I mean, if you dig deeper, you can get to the actual names, but in the category, it's just called $100 donations or less. And they can be like $5,000 in that line item because you had a good town hall meeting or something and you raised tons of small donations. So, but they all have to be 100 or less. But then, like when I worked on Charles Lee's campaign for House against Jeff Cruz, we raised with small donation limits. He put limits on it, $100 limit. And we were so proud of how much we raised. But the pharmaceutical company in Holland wrote a check that matched our whole amount because Jeff was the chair of the health committee. So that's really what brought it to my attention is this is just so corrupt.
Yeah.
That one check can match all the populism that we're working to develop.
So Patrick, the current legislative session is over when?
In March. Yeah, it's really short.
And so this may die within the system, or you mentioned something about letters to the editor.
Yeah, we're really trying to get folks to write letters to the editor and then share them directly with their representative or their state senator because we want to put the pressure because you have to put pressure on them directly from your constituents because they're looking over their shoulder at their donor and they're like, well, Comcast, what do you think about how should I vote on this? Or OEA, what do you think? How should I vote on this? So the leadership is really pushing this through quickly through their committees to get it on the floor as soon as possible. And there's so much other like the transportation bill. There's so much bigger and important things that are distracting regular members. Even I mean, most of the members Kevin and I met with hardly knew what we were talking about because a lot of
So
us thought it was
Is it
over.
going to die? Yeah. Is it going to
No,
die then?
I think it's got a lot of legs because the leadership really is pushing it through. You have the Secretary of State asking for the delays and scaring people with the $20 million price tag. And then you have the Speaker of the House, who's the largest donor in the building, or the largest collector of donations in the whole building, wants to do it too. I mean, who knows? She may want to run for governor too. Once Kotek's gone, 2030 could have all kinds of characters that are used to the old system is basically what we're talking about. The old
Is there a,
system is no limits whatsoever. So
is there a central place where people can find out more information of how they can get involved right now? Because this seems like they have to start doing it now if they're going to do anything about it.
yeah, I've the best I can do is my Facebook post. But if you want to get into the nuts and bolts, Honest Elections, it has the lawyers and they have all the expertise because they've written these ballot measures that passed substantially. And they've been fighting it for over 20 years. I just started in 2018, but I try to directly encourage people. Like today, it was so cool. I don't know if anybody remembers Les Coyne, a coin. He's going to write a guest column in the Oregonian opposed to this. So, I mean, that's huge. So, because he's a friend on Facebook. I met him during his old days as a congressperson, but that's you got to really work it on all the angles, all over in every county too, because it's not just the Willamette Valley. We have to get because the R's are just as worried about it as the D's. They both have a unlimited spigot, and they're a little freaked out about limiting that spigot.
Well, thank you very much for being here and giving folks a heads up about what's going on and actually the whole thing about the battle of campaign finance reform in Oregon. And the one thing, if this doesn't go in and we're not going to have these campaign finance limit, we're one of only 5 states that do not have campaign finance limits. And
Yeah, one of
so,
five, like Mississippi. And if you're able to have me back, we could talk about successes or partial successes or hopefully a complete success.
absolutely,
they've
sure.
set some limits and they need to stick to it, not change them. And they don't even go into effect till 2027. So it's already delayed. Um, and so it's pretty frustrating to have to. I mean, I would like to spend this time tweaking things and making them more improved, like Zach was saying, the whole whack-a-mole thing, uh, rather than just even to get limits or to enact them in a timely manner. Because what's scary is that if it gets pushed out to 2031, you'll have a whole new batch of Congress people there because those they change every 2 years. So some of them won't even know what we were talking about back in 24 or 2018, so they'll be like Phil Knight who. So then you have to go through this fight all over again. It's like, so Tobias Reed can't wait until he's governor and we just, and we got to have $20 million to do campaign finance reform. Give me a break. You just need a simpler version.
All right.
Thanks
Well,
again.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for doing it, and thanks for Kevin for going up there um and you might have convinced me to write a letter to the editor.
Ah, there we go. Lots of them. And
I said
maybe
might, but
yeah, right. And maybe I'll
I
get
gotta
on
do it tomorrow.
Francis's show and talk about it again because and I'm going to hang on to hear your other speaker because
All right. So that's a good place to segue into. Dave Alba is, I think I mentioned the Progressive Democrats of America, the Oregon, I guess it's a coordinator that I think it's kind of more of a whole of Oregon chapter. There's not local chapters that I'm aware
Mhm.
of.
Yes.
But also the co-author of the Rural New Deal. That I think one of the reasons I thought about Dave and having him come on the show months ago is about this whole concept. We've been talking about the commons, right, and citizens assembly, and who should make decisions, and how do we, as the regular citizens, become civically engaged in order to do that. And the Rural New Deal is kind of that policy framework that would be good to, to look at is starting discussions, including, what Zach has written for the community rights, and start having these bigger discussions. So anyway, Dave, if what else you want to say? Introduce yourself
Yeah,
more, or just
let's just get
start
right
to.
into it.
All
Yeah, I
right.
mean, I live in Philomath. I live rural. I raise dairy goats. I have, small farm. Um, and so, the rural perspective is important to me. Um, but first, building off of what Patrick just talked about, let's just lay it out there that campaign finance reform would be good for rural communities. If money equals political power, and money is focused in urban areas. And as Patrick was just talking about, leadership, they have the money, they come from urban areas. Where's that representation for rural communities? So that's a big factor here. Um, Again, piggybacking off of Patrick's comments, he also mentioned authenticity and public trust. The more authentic our candidates are, the more they appeal to rural communities, um, and the more trust we build. So those are some of the thoughts I have following up on Patrick's discussion. So yeah, in 2023, we wrote the Rural New Deal with the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, Anthony Floccavento in Virginia. So, so the policy is we have it's a national policy here that we're working on. Um, it's written in such a way, and I threw it into the chat so you can look at it. Um, or if you're listening, you can go to Progressive Democrats of America. You can Google Rural New Deal and you can get right to it. It's also posted on Rural Urban Bridge Initiative's website. The way it's organized, we wrote up 5 principles that sort of are guiding principles, but really the essence that we should talk about are the 10 pillars um, and some of the examples from the 10 pillars. Um, but I also want to make sure we have some discussion. So I think the best way to move forward here is I'll just do a quick run through of the pillars and some of the examples, and then we should have a discussion around it. Um, so, real quickly, 10 pillars. Uh, Rebuilding farms and forests, rewarding work and ensuring livable wages, dismantling monopolies and empowering and supporting local business, investing in community and regional infrastructure, rebuilding small town centers, cultivating self-reliance and resilience, investing in rural healthcare, fully funding rural schools, making rural and small town housing affordable, and relocalizing rural and small town banks. And from those 10 pillars, I like to pull out some of the examples um, of, well, I would call them success stories that kind of outline what we're talking about. So rebuilding farms and forests. There's some great community forest projects out there. Um, Personally, I liked going to northwestcommunityforest.org as a resource to look at some of those projects, but ways that ownership of forests is moving into community ownership. Also, the Coast Range Associations, who I know, Betsy, you've probably had them on, or certainly you talk with them a lot with Chuck Willer. Um, their proposal for climate and Oregon's Industrial Forest Green New Deal, which is land reform, um, buyout of private industrial forest, and transferring those lands to locally owned and operated social benefit enterprises. That's a good example of the kind of stuff we're talking about there. Rewarding work and ensuring livable wages. Well, I think we're all familiar with uh, um, minimum wage reform. We specifically call out the need for a federal jobs guarantee of livable wages, um, dismantling monopolies and empowering local businesses. I like to see the example that happened in Joseph, Oregon, where because of the campaign against Dollar General in Wallowa, they were able to ban to make a unanimously passed emergency ordinance that banned what they called formula businesses, which prevented Dollar General from entering the community. So I feel like that's a good example. Um, Another favorite example I have of dismantling monopolies, and I'm going to use this example again on another pillar, but um, the Central Coast Food Web in Newport has created a farm and fish market, and you go to centralcoastfoodweb.org, where they're working with the local restaurateur, the Yakina Lab, so they have a cooperative processing facility for small fishermen so that they don't have to bring their fish to the monopolized processing facility in Newport. I'd like to revisit that. Another pillar, rebuilding small town centers. Where I live in Philomath, a lot of grant money has been used to do some streetscaping, which is really changing the town. And then I was telling Patrick earlier, I was also personally involved in restoring a central building on Main Street. So those kinds of projects is what we're talking about there in that rebuilding. Cultivating self-reliance and resilience. One of my favorite examples is actually we do some work in Hawaii in East Maui, there a restoration of creek rights, creeks and water rights. The industries there had redirected water, and folks were able to reclaim those rights and get the water back to their communities. Um, Another pillar, investing in rural health. I think, that's kind of speaks for itself, but, I find it interesting. For example, in Polk County, through the service integration teams, they've been able to move money around and address, for example, transportation needs. A big part of rural health is being able to get to the healthcare, whether it's brought to you or you're able to get to it. So the Chariots bus or mass transit district has been able to um, make sure that folks have transportation. Fully funding rural schools. It's not one of my areas of expertise, but I know the Secure Rural Schools bill for a while was moving federal funds, but that was shut down. Making rural and small town housing affordable. I think an example I like is in Nye Beach, the Surfside village, manufactured home village, was turned into a co-op so that it's resident owned. I think that's empowering for rural communities. And while there are plenty of housing issues, we could go on and on. Um, some of the issues around how manufactured home communities are owned and operated is a significant issue to look at. Relocalizing rural and small town banks. I know we had the failed legislation of the House Bill 2763 that would have helped. And so public banking is an important issue and would be an important benefit to rural communities. So that's just how I wanted to introduce the 10 pillars and then kind of open it up for discussion around any of those topics or questions you might have about the Rural New Deal and how we're implementing it.
Well, I guess I'll take the first stab. Hey, Dave, it's Kevin here.
Hi,
You've
Kevin.
seen the Rural New Deal being talked about a whole lot about, and some really progressive candidates across the country, actually. the example I'll give right now was Melissa Bird is really championing it right now here in the Oregon Fourth District against her primary against Val Hoyle. My other question is, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, is we work with the Coast Range Association. And so, what is kind of more the specific differences between the rural and the Green New Deal? Because it seems like they already kind of go hand in hand.
Okay. So when it comes to candidates, yes, Melissa is a great example. Melissa Bird for Congress in the fourth district. Um, she comes from she's a working class family, uh, indigenous heritage. I think, what we see in a candidate like that is the authenticity, once again, and the ability to gain public trust. Um, Makes for a candidate who is a true rural populist and will appeal to people based on policy rather than money. So I think she's a great example for that, for a lot of the things we've talked about. Um, and so bringing the Rural New Deal to these candidates and helping them use it as part of their campaign platforms, I think is very beneficial. Um, and I think, and I know the folks at Rural Urban Bridge Initiative also agree that it it's a winning approach, right? To be able to speak clearly about policies that will benefit rural communities. Um, okay, and then the sort of the Green New Deal and the Rural New Deal. The one of the visions for the Rural New Deal is to move it into to make it like the Green New Deal, a congressional resolution that provides a roadmap to rural policy. Um, as part of that initiative to take it into Congress, there's actually we're looking at ways actually to sort of reframe it in a way that feels less partisan than what the Green New Deal has become. Kevin, what else about that topic did you want to try to cover or discuss?
Well, I thought it was interesting how when you brought up the Green New Deal, there was a little talk about redistribution of vital assets for communities and try to do some more community ownership. And I think that's kind of what I was bringing up. But also at the same time, you already covered it by going over the 10 pillars, because I think in regards to like public ownership of banks or public ownership of a lot of these utilities, those are so you can actually hold yourself and the community accountable. But I also like the idea because in regards to our local community, we were just at a town hall in Drain the other day, and besides their local food store going out of business, they just learned that just because Drain is so small a community that I guess they don't make enough income, and they're just pulling the Columbia out of the local bank out of Drain, Oregon too. I mean, there's just how much an income a per capita a city can make really requires, and it really screws the rural areas.
Yeah. And so any kind of movement towards locally owned enterprises, and I guess what Chuck Willer at Coast Range Association has identified as these social benefit enterprises is really important. And as he points out, the co-ops that were established, like our electric utilities, that those kinds of co-ops are great models for what we could do with other businesses.
I have a question. Is there a way that um, this aligns with the Governor Kotek's prosperity roadmap that she's bringing about for the state of Oregon? And how can we put that together?
Um, I'm sure there are plenty of alignment. I doubt the governor has seen our Rural New Deal, uh, and that, but we're capturing a moment or a movement where these changes are being called for. Um, and I'm not familiar with the roadmap yet, but I will go ahead and take a look at it.
The prosperity roadmap, and she's inviting
Mm-hmm,
people to the tables. And I think that it would be great if you could figure out how you could get to the table
mm-hmm.
as a representative
Yeah,
for economic success. It's actually really pretty good.
yeah, I will look at it. And, I had mentioned the work that Anthony Floccavento, who is the executive director of the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, he's doing great sort of top-down work in that regard, where he's working with the DNC and the Rural Caucus at the DNC to bring the Rural New Deal into Congress through that pathway. And that's where we see some more top-down influence. Individually, my focus has really been on these sort of success stories and not as much of the citizen lobbying that I would like to see more of.
I think these success stories that you speak to are really in good timing for what we need here and the shifts that are happening on the economic success in this roadmap. So getting in there is about that timing. And really,
Okay.
I think we can be, the rural areas in Oregon can be a little bit left behind. I'm seeing she's pulling in the timber industry and she is looking at bringing in like a world level semiconductor and different business economic success. So she's pivoted from social services, and she was focusing a lot on that in the beginning, but with this kind of soft succession going on, this is really an opportunity to bring up how to have this roadmap, this new real new deal fitting in with the prosperity roadmap, because I think we're going to be left behind with what they've got going on, or those big lobbyists and what's going on federally with the logging and those mandates coming down, for those yields coming down. I think we could be looked at like we're going to benefit from that in the rural areas, but they're going to
Mm.
go back to what the logging was in the 60s, and people think that it's going to be prosperous for rural communities, but those logs are not the same levels as what they were. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't know. I just feel like with this that the rural areas can get really left behind right now with all that's happening.
Yeah, and that makes me think about, some of the influence that, well, rural economic prosperity industries other than timber had, and I'm thinking of like Eastern Oregon industries that are associated often more as conservative. Um, well, I'm thinking of regenerative ranching in Eastern Oregon, frankly. The DeFreeze Ranch, for example, 5 generations of ranching. And now in this fifth generation, you have young people, um, maybe coming out of ag school at Oregon State University and bringing back with practical some of the sustainable practices are actually old practices. So it's kind of a full loop. And to have that buy-in from these ranchers, I think could be a positive influence on initiatives like the governor's initiative.
I agree.
Dave, I support those pillars because, they're really bipartisan. I mean, I think that some of those issues in a rural community, I've always lived in rural communities, except for where I went to U of O. Um, those are the common ground issues, especially housing, affordable housing, and affordable health care and those kinds of things. I mean, losing your bank in your small town, losing your major grocery store, like Kevin was sharing, that's huge. And so I think if we could have these successes together, that'll build that trust and bipartisanship, and that's what's disappointing about rural county commissioners not being problem solvers, because they should have
Mm,
been there for Drain to help
mm,
with that store. I mean, they have huge reserves that could get somebody through a tough time. It's just like I've been kicking around an idea here in Lynn County, because you see all these blue tarps on people's roofs. And if the county, Lynn County, had a program that could help people fix their roofs, which is crucial in Oregon with the rain.
mm.
If you lose your roof, you're going to lose everything. So, and it would just put the property, it would be a part of their tax lien. So if they resold it, that amount that they needed to save their roof could be incorporated into their taxes, which they could pay maybe 100 a month to fix that roof rather than outlaying $9,000. So this is the kind of problem solving that's
Mm.
sadly missing in rural county commissioner offices,
Yeah,
where they've got these huge reserves in the road fund or somewhere, and they're just not helping drain, and they're not helping the little people across the county with little
right.
things that you would think aren't big things. But when you see blue tarps all over the roofs in Oregon, that's a problem. So,
Yeah, I like
and
that.
I, I just think that having these successes together is really going to build the team.
We are working on I forget what Anthony's calling it, but we're working on a document to put these success stories into sort of a complementary document to the policy roadmap.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe a documentary, a short, YouTube
yeah,
thing.
that would be nice. So I think it is important, and of course, we were intentionally looking at ways to be as nonpartisan as possible, so that we do approach this as a rural populist approach, and we do make it appealing to rural communities, regardless of political positions, because that's what we experience in rural communities. We make things better for ourselves and our communities, regardless of our political stances. We want to make sure our schools are functioning well, and yeah, and we have our banks and our healthcare taken care of. We want to take care of each other, and that's part of rural character. And so we want to take that value, those values, and push them into a political platform, and make it work for rural communities. And we hear that, we hear, um, politicians talking about how we have to address the needs of rural communities. But then circling back to campaign finance reform, if money equals power, then rural communities get left behind.
Or the people that have those big backing get lifted up, and whether they're qualified or not, and they're not having vision for the future or for economic development, or looking out for opportunities, or hungry to be innovated for that, and small businesses, they're just looking out for the timber industry. While here in Douglas County, they just recently, we lost over 300 jobs while they're being shipped out and automated. So that economic development, it's just going towards the corporations.
Right. Yeah, um, one of the nice terms that has come up in the work that we did with Anthony Flacavento in Virginia is because they're working in the Appalachias, um, this idea of honoring local ingenuity. making that space and moving the funding in such a way that we honor solutions that are coming out of the communities. Which brings us back into some of what Betsy was talking about with uh, uh, the citizen assemblies and bringing power back to people so that the innovation and the implementation of programs is within is given to local communities to handle instead of this top-down approach. I'd like to hear more about because of I believe that citizen engagement, citizen assemblies is one of the tools that we have available to empower rural communities. I would actually, if we have time, like to hear more about what's going on in Roseburg around that because I've actually, as an Irish citizen, I have followed and looked at the model of the Irish citizen assemblies. It's a great model. It's a little bit like jury duty, uh, where citizens are gathered to deliberate on a particular topic. Whereas we're so far from that here, where we can't even get, comment periods, feedback into these governmental task force, and we're so disempowered as citizens. Is someone here who can speak a little bit about what's going on in Roseburg with citizen
Well,
assemblies?
John can, but I can just mention one actually activity that's happening directly related to getting that body of people together, and that is a People's Homeless Commission to parallel the city of Roseburg's homeless commission because it really has been ineffective and actually destructive. And so we're right now, Max Smoot was in the audience. I don't see if he's still in the audience, but he was here. He started, he and I and a few other people just started talking about it because we have such a wealth of knowledge of people who've been working on homelessness who know what the right thing to do. And there is a right and wrong thing to do. I'm sorry, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, so that actually is in the process now of getting people's interest, right? And we're going to kick it off with a town hall in March to kind of, we haven't totally settled on the topic, but we're trying to say, okay, what's the most critical thing that people always bring up about this issue? And then bring in people to talk and start the dialogue among whoever shows up. And so that just in that little activity that we're trying right now, but community rights, Douglas County's been working on this. So John, you wanna and then Zach unfortunately left because Zach has been doing study about, various like what's going on in Portland and stuff to kind of bring that attention. And we'll do some shows on it in the future too here.
Mm-hmm.
John.
Yeah, yeah, it's too bad Zach left, but we've started. Well, just see this real fast. Statement of the Principles of Free Government. That's a pamphlet that Zach wrote up, and we've been distributing it. It basically is a lot of the same ideas that Dave is talking about, and we're trying to get we're trying to encourage collaboration amongst as many local groups as we can here, and build up to try to get to be able to get their voices heard kind of in a united manner. We had a presentation 7th of this month by the Rural Organizing Project, and we had like at least 15 different groups there. So that was encouraging, and ROP talked about kind of what they have to offer, and we're trying to stimulate ideas for people, and we're working on doing a follow-up presentation it's still a working, it's still a working, in progress. It's always gonna take some time. Hopefully, we have the time. Stephanie from Rural Organizing Project kind of candidly admitted that there's communities that they've been working on, for 4 years to get, work on, on a collaboration. And she made the very candid point that that there's a lot of grudges that you got to overcome. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that was a realistic one. So uh, we're trying to just really encourage as many groups as possible, to come together in these. And that one we had on the 7th was a community potluck, and we hope to do some more of those too. And we're open for any ideas that anybody has too. It's I think what you were saying, Dave, is we have a long ways to go in this state, and Douglas County is there's a lot of people are very hesitant to even commit themselves, and so it's a really uphill battle, and sometimes you just got to step out and do it, and you realize that, well, that didn't go so bad after all. Maybe I can, maybe I can take the next step. So it is but anyway, that's kind of what we've been trying to do.
Okay.
And we want to encourage. So
I was with Kevin last week and was shocked to hear the Douglas County commissioners no longer allow public comment
no,
at their meetings unless it deals with the agenda. So that's a huge legal battle that an organizing community could rally around to get that fixed. I mean, you can't come in there and talk about blue plastic tarps on roofs. You can't even put it on their radar because they don't have a public comment period any longer, David. It's amazing. When I was in Douglas County till 2012, you could disagree politely and civilly, but you can't even bring up a new topic.
Yeah, it's impossible, and they don't want to hear it. So
Right.
and they only any volunteer boards they have, whether it be the Parks Commission or the Planning Commission or anything, any opening that they have, it goes, they won't consider anybody unless it's their own people. So they're eliminating any ideas that way too. I mean, heaven forbid that somebody gets on the park board and say, I don't think that we should log this park here. They don't want to hear that. So
yeah.
Right. And so that kind of that need for democratic reform, right, is good for rural communities. We have to identify these barriers and understand them. What's this dynamic that's going on where our county commissioners and city governments are being dominated by staff and attorneys, and rather than the interests of the people. It's a very big topic among folks that I'm working with in all different aspects, where they're not being
I think
heard.
that most people probably do. Yeah. I think that most people don't even know about this issue regarding the county commission, just like with most things, right? Politics. But this is something that current county candidates for county commissioner could actually address, and if they want to do that, they could ask me about the ins and outs of why that happened. And I don't and one thing I just want to make clear, they don't have to have general public comments. They don't have to legally have comments on anything but things that are mandated via a public hearing. Okay, so if the law requires a public hearing, they have to allow that. But it really, unfortunately, none of our elected bodies are Um, it's an ability to watch them. It is not ability to participate in the process of the operation of the business. So that is one of the rubs and why they probably may, even if that were challenged in court, might get away with it. But I did suggest people that were why it happened was because of people going up there and challenging them. So there was probably some grounds to file a legal suit, but they didn't take my word for it, and so there was never challenged. I do think it's a great political issue. I think really it would be a very good thing to just have even an informal petition, to start, organizing around. If you're talking, that starts a discussion of transparent government and ultimately the bigger picture, even with the homeless commission, ultimately it's going to have to address the policymakers, no matter what citizens come together and we try to do on our own. If we want to put porta potties where they don't have porta potties in a park right now, we can't really do that without the city allowing us to do that. Right. So, at some level, and the same thing with the county commissioners. Ultimately, if you want county commissioners who don't get authoritarian crazy, because Patrick, you're absolutely right. And for one, a lot of the interaction I have had with county commissioners in the past, and I don't really go to the meetings and I haven't for a while, was to bring up a topic that was not on their agenda, right? To point out something that was related to county business that wasn't on their agenda. So it did squash, I'm sure a lot of other people did that. But there was never even a problem, even things got a little bit edgy, that the county commissioners would hold it against you, right?
Right. Yeah.
That is part of their job, okay?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
public servant, and this is a good opportunity to organize statewide to have Salem add this. If we need to change the open meetings laws, they don't allow
Yes.
new agenda items could be one of the things on the public comment, new agenda item. It's like you hear from the public, they say, we'd like you to put this on your agenda, so they don't have to get mean and attack the commissioners. But if you wanted to bring up something that wasn't on their radar, Salem could maybe make the rule change. And that's an organizing tool for David or whoever statewide, because Douglas County is probably not alone in this kind of
Hmm.
shenanigans of blocking democracy.
Well,
It's bizarre.
well, Patrick, I came up last Tuesday to, really start learning the ins and outs. And me and Betsy were talking earlier about how, frankly, a lot of what is we don't get a lot of representation in Salem, especially here in Douglas County. And it would be great if we got a team together and you would start giving us some helpful tips. And then one of these days during the next couple of sessions, you could have an army of lobbyists at your disposal because you taught them how to do it. We're all fighting for the same thing. And speaking of the devil, I just saw Lori say, yes, Patrick, like they'd volunteer to come up to Salem with us. So,
Well, great. Yeah, because like if you got Virgil to do a rule change to public, and then you got somebody else on the other side of the aisle to support it, with the Dem majority, you have to have them be the sponsor, and then Virgil could be the co-sponsor or something. And it's pretty surprising who comes out of the woodwork when it comes to the issue of freedom of speech. You can get some really conservative people to come to your aid when they hear you're not allowed to bring up new items at a county commissioner meeting. So, and especially if they don't live in your county and they don't depend on the same money as
well, it sounds like we just left this meeting with one more set of several action items, which is during next legislative body session, we'll get together with some Douglas County people and see what we can shake up in Salem with your help, because we need to, and you're the guy I'd like to learn from personally.
well. I'd be happy to help if I can after we conquer this campaign finance reform. That's my commitment.
All right. So, anybody else have anything to say before, thank you, David, for the Rural New Deal and the work on the Rural New Deal. I just want to say that PDA is Progressive Democrats of America. And I know I said that before, but they are not, they've been around for 20 some years. Am I correct about that? And, and are credited or accused of being responsible for Bernie Sanders' first run. Right, to convince him to run, as a Democrat, which really having, been a fan of Ralph Nader, the reality is Bernie wouldn't have probably gotten where he did if he had not been a Democrat. It may be a sad reflection of of the two-party system, but that's probably a reality because the policies were very similar. It's just that, the machine of one of the two parties is unfortunately what is needed in electoral politics. So right
Yeah,
now.
and Vermont's a rural state, so the rural independent angle, the rural populist angle is very pertinent to Bernie's success too, you know.
Yeah, but they also don't have partisan elections, which is, so that's another thing, say in Vermont. And that's why, he wasn't a Dem when we voted for him for the Democratic Party nomination in Oregon. And so, because these are state, decisions. But I I think, the work that PDA has done, I just bring that up because a lot of people, whether they're Democrat or not, probably have no idea who PDA is, to be honest, and really they should, because they've, I haven't attended their Sunday town halls at 1 o'clock, but they often have hundreds of people in the room. They bring candidates and issues, and they have a lot of activity. So if people are, and they have a philosophy of what working inside the Democratic Party and outside of the party. So it's not really,
Right.
that. So.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, recognize that while a lot of people aren't aware of Progressive Democrats of America, they're doing such great behind the scenes work to
Yeah.
line up our progressive allies who are in the government. The word
Yes.
infiltration comes to mind, and they're really lining them up and empowering them, and folks like Ro Khanna and others who are just you know uh, just great allies to the organization and moving policy forward.
Yes, yes, good point. Thank you for, I'd forgotten about that, but you're absolutely right because they also do work on that federal level politics and provide and have one of the best social media, connecting services of the national as far as how to get the word out to, when people actually and keep people updated on the politics of what's happening at the congressional levels and in state levels.
Right,
So,
and advancing progressive candidates wherever they are, very strategically. And I'm happy to say they have endorsed Melissa Byrd for Congress in the fourth district, and that means that they're helping her raise money. They're phone banking for her, and that's people around the country helping that campaign. So it is a valuable organization.
That's great. Uh, Another thing that I'm kind of finding is that there's opportunities that I think that can be developed and not seen because there's a lot of status quo and people are not organized, or I'll just give one example. They around homelessness, I think that people have their own opinions versus there's somebody who's worked in homelessness for a long time and they put that cause down versus they have the better idea, and it doesn't help the platform, or it doesn't help movement in homelessness when people are trying to move it forward, and it just keeps kicking the can around over these issues. So collaborating with people that care but have their own opinions and ideas about it, like pull your bootstraps up. We're not just going to give you a home, even though, for example, data informed decision making is that if somebody has a home, it costs less than homelessness. and then they can recover their lives easier. Um, but we're kind of like doing this, okay, you can stay in the tents, which that's fine if there's band-aids to get to the next step. But there's these ideas and opinions that are holding back true progress. And that is the case because we have leadership as well that are limiting, that aren't trying to search for opportunities or be progressive. And especially here in Douglas County, that status quo. So we have a lot of mills here, but what's not seen on the outside is that they cut a bunch of shifts or are only down to day shifts, or the people who've been here a long time, it's this kind of slow boil where our buildings are empty and you're not seeing that other people that drive by want to keep driving because there's no appeal to our town. Or somebody brings forward, hey, when you have arts around and we have this extra money to do the park, they're not even putting it on the survey. Should we put arts in the park as well? When we have these people that are progressive at the table saying arts are proven to bring money into towns and tourists and stuff. These ideas that are business and economically savvy, and you have these really good data points behind it, are kind of being squashed out and put to the side and not brought forward. And so that's a little, I don't know how to fix that. And collaboration is very difficult, but being progressive in a town that um, it's a little difficult. I don't know how to kind of bring that forward right now. That's all.
Well, in the housing and homeless and what to do about it, the data is pretty solid about what should be done. It's been out there, and there's experts that I follow, and most of us don't just make shit up. And so the
That's my
data's out
point,
there.
Betsy. I know.
And the city council of Roseburg and the current mayor have been repeatedly told where it is and where to find those resources. They don't have to believe us. So ultimately, it becomes like the People's Homeless Commission, which is why that is being motivated to actually get a broader knowledge of the general population, who also tends to be pretty ignorant and has an opinion, but they have no real evidence but their own prejudice and belief systems about what should happen. So, but we can, provide information, but we live in a world that is terribly anti-fact oriented. And that is, an obstacle we see in part of this problem. But it could be arts in the park. You're absolutely right. It doesn't matter what it is. And I make this simple observation. We have the will to solve homelessness. I mean, we have the way, we just don't have the will. And the will has to come back to what I said earlier about the People's Assembly. Ultimately, whatever we decide to do as a community, those policymakers are going to be engaged because they're going to decide whether we can put a porta potty in the park, because we could do it, but we'll probably get tickets and they can take the toilet away. So how many times are we going to keep doing that, right? So, and I think that's with any policy. It's even like the discussion we had months ago about what you're going to do with Stewart Park and putting artificial turf and fence off exclusively for soccer players, one of the few parks that the city has and the main park the city has. So it's the same decision process, right? A small group of people who have influence, who have power, whether it's campaign donations or not, whether it's because they live next door. I don't know what, can you address that? Hopefully, because we're really kind of screwed if we don't.
I
Right.
wonder, I
We need to
wonder,
do something
Betsy,
different.
I wonder if you could, since you can't get the policymakers to go to those experts and research it, wonder if there's a way to host some of the experts at
Yeah.
an event, and especially if you have the event in the city hall building or at the county commissioner's building, so it's like right in their face, So if there's a panel of these experts that you could host, I know that's a lot of work, but because then you get the press from it, you You get the TV covering it, you get the paper covering it, and you can have your own media cover it. So then they hear it from an outsider that says, here's the facts. It's not the usual suspects like we are all accused of.
Yeah, yeah. And we have a lot of expertise of the usual suspects in this community. And I'm not just saying that about me. There's a lot of people who have a lot of expertise in this and come down with the same ultimate opinion that I have because they read the sources and believe facts. But the national, actually, that's what we're doing when we do the meeting in March, the public town hall. It's kind of like to set the stage to do that, Patrick. Yeah, absolutely, is to bring as many people as we can. Even hopefully get the public health official to come and talk about the public health consequences of homeless people shitting in Deer Creek Park. Okay. And all these other, so you have to deal with the reality of what your ineffective consequences are happen. Well, they're not inconsequential, but they're certainly ineffective. They don't solve homelessness, and there's a whole mess. I don't know when's the next time you come to Douglas County, go to Deer Creek Park, check it out. It looks like a third world country, and they're living
Yeah.
in, it's a mess. Or
And
you
it's
could
by
Google it.
yeah, and it's by the library. Before we
No,
close,
no, it's the part that goes right into the South Umpqua. It's that
okay,
part of it.
the other side of the highway. And
Yeah.
before you close, I hope I could hear from Joanna and Francis, some folks that haven't spoke, because I know Joanna's, you think you're isolated. She's way up the river. It'd be great to hear about their challenges.
Okay. Well, I'll give a little something about what pisses me off about the timber industry is Roseburg Forest Products just laid off a bunch of their workers, right? And that's because Roseburg Forest Products on their land, when they log it, they ship a lot of those logs over to China. Now, the federal government isn't allowed to do that. And the BLM, the Forest Service, they are really the only ones feeding the local mills with logs for those workers there. And I think there should be, this is a state issue, really not a county issue, but I think there should be kind of a state looking at the fact that all these logs in Oregon are being shipped overseas for processing, raw logs shipped overseas for processing. So that's my beef anyway.
Is there a good source for those numbers that you could share
Yeah,
with me?
I've seen a good source. I mean, Chuck Willer has a lot of those. I could look up a good source and send it to you, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. Because my Senate district is Cedric Hayden's, so it's East Lane, it's East Lynn, and it's basically all of the Willamette National Forest. I mean, there's more trees in that district than there are people. So that's specifically would relate to that kind of a local situation.
Another quick issue that has just come to my attention. You all know the Coos Bay Wagon Road lands, which are different from the O&C lands. The Coos Bay Wagon Road lands is this really beautiful forest managed by Coos Bay BLM, and it parallels Highway 42 a little to the north of it. And it's got a lot of old growth and it's really beautiful. I forget how many acres, maybe about 60,000 acres of federal land there. It's all very few plantations, a lot of old growth. And I heard that Van Hoyle has been talking with the Coquel tribe to transfer those lands over to the tribe. And that concerns me because all the lands that the tribe has gotten so far from BLM, they've immediately clear cut them. It's all clear cut. And so I'm really concerned for the Coos Bay Wagon Road lands. Just want to throw that out there.
Well, and that'd be an interesting situation for Shirley Bird, being indigenous, if she came out and said, we don't trust the Coquille tribe, because in my day in Douglas County, they just hired Lone Rock Timber. I remember how, Rick Zone clear cut their land they got from the feds. So
Right. And they also a gate off their land that they got from the BLM. They said, oh, and they weren't allowed to keep the public out. So they said, oh, you can feel free to walk in, but you can't drive in. And so, I mean, what are these Coos Bay BLM? It's a high recreation area in the East Fork Coquille. It's a lot of swimming, there's waterfalls, and there's a lot of fishing. So the public use this is a high recreation use area. One of the roads up to the Dorner Fir starts there on the Coos Bay Wagon Road land. So I I'm concerned about this turn of events. Yeah.
yeah, I think that'd be a good one for Shirley Bird.
Dr.
Melissa Bird.
Dr.
Doctor.
Melissa Bird.
Thank you.
Oh,
Melissa.
that's Shirley. Melissa.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr.
Sorry
Melissa
about,
Bird.
sorry about that.
Just putting that out there.
So
We
those-
had a homeless advocate here in Lynn County that's a Shirley bird, so I get those two.
Right.
So as
And-
long as you ask, I feel I just would put out there my two big beefs currently. So there it is.
Those are some good big beefs. And also I heard that what they have to process the logs before they're shipped to China. And so sometimes when they're too big, they'll just they take it to some special mill that has just one big saw, and they'll saw it in half and call that processed.
Yeah, or
And
they just square it up. Yeah, too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they find their way around things to
It's
qualify.
interesting to go to Coos Bay and look at the ships with all these huge logs piled on them, and it's right there, open to the public when you drive down the main street of Coos Bay there.
Joanne, did you want to?
I want to tie in with what Betsy's saying, not Francis, what Francis is saying. I'm really concerned about them opening up the O&C land, and also, the gates that have gone in. I can't get to places I used to be able to get to in a car, and
Because a lot of the
And-
Coos Bay lands around O&C lands around your place were given to the Coos, the Coos tribe, right?
around my place, the Forest Service, Umpqua National Forest, has given land to the Cow Creek tribe. They're working together, and the Cow Creeks do clear cuts.
They
They're
just,
not.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think clear cuts should be absolutely stopped. I'm ready for anarchy. I'm sick and tired of corporations owning buildings and abandoning them. It's right in my face, but it's also scattered around Douglas County. Canyonville has this old building that I don't know who's going to pay for tearing it down, because they just get abandoned. And let people move into those buildings and take care of them. Just take over our town. That's my half a cent.
That's the town of Tiller, right? Which is a ghost town now, or
Well, and Canyonville is on her way, and that a lot of these corporations, and a lot of them are owned by big banks like Deutsche Bank, and they get a write-off when they're depreciating like that. So that's why I proposed that idea of the vacancy fee would tax them at how much they could be rented, and if you didn't put humans in them, then you would pay this vacancy fee, and that would go to the Oregon Shelter Fund. So if you need money for housing, these vacant buildings would be paying for it,
That'd be
or they'd be
great.
given to a nonprofit, or they'd be given to a housing group.
Because it
Right.
doesn't look very good to bring in more business when you have all these shuttered buildings all around. Who
Yeah,
wants
it's the old broken window dilemma. Remember the old broken windows?
Right. So,
All right.
Lots of common
So-
ground issues to work on together.
All right. So I
Thanks for
think we're
coming on,
done.
everybody. We'll see you
Yes.
next time. See you next Sunday, and have a good week, everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for hosting. Good night.
All
Thank
right.
you for
Good night.
presenting, you guys.